All right, so I'm going to share it onto the wall now. I just got to give me a second to get it on. We don't have any viewers yet, so let me just give me 1 second. There it is. So I'm going to share it onto the Tear Talk wall. So you may have to load fresh to get it on there.
Yeah,
Um,
it just popped up. I just saw it.
okay, so now it's on the Tear Talk wall, and I'll also put it in the Correctional Brotherhood as well.
Okay.
And then we'll see. We'll start seeing people come up. And I'm going to share it on Sherry Sandler's wall too. So before we start talking, I'll put it on her wall so she knows that we're gonna get hit up. But again, I got some viewers coming in now. We're up to 3 right now, so it's gonna start coming. It's gonna start building. But
Okay,
basically,
cool.
yeah, it's at 9 now, so it's building. So in case you guys don't know, I do have Michael Pittaro here, and we have an event coming up at. Oh, Sherry Sandler joined. She's on. All right, so I don't have to put it on her timeline. So Mike, you want to say hi to Sherry real quick?
Hi, Sherry. How you doing?
We're ready for tomorrow, Miss Sandler. Okay, so we're moving up. So, Mike, do you got the live feed or no?
I do, but it is blank.
Oh, it's not going. Well, I got the comments, so I can just read them off. But I just wanted to give you guys. Hey, John, what's going on, brother? Just checking in. Hey, John, we're doing a quick. I have an event tomorrow, John, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna touch about the topic that we're gonna be discussing at the event tomorrow, at the ACA event, which is gonna be at Mercer County College. John, what's your radio station again, so I can give it a shout out. But tomorrow we have an ACA event at Mercer County College, and it's dedicated to leadership and training, which I definitely think is something that we need to discuss greatly. I think it's something that I think the evolution of corrections, where we're at now, definitely it relates directly to training and leadership. So I think this will actually help us move forward. And I see Michael Pittaro is joining. He's our guest now. Mike, just real quickly, this ain't an official show. It's just going to be a discussion, so we're going to be open to the dialogue. But we are going to be talking about transformational leadership. So if you just want to introduce yourself to the people we have listening now.
Absolutely. My name is Dr. Michael Pittaro. I am Assistant Professor of Criminal Justice with American Military University, and I am an adjunct professor with East Stroudsburg University.
Man, I know you were busy today, so I want to thank you for coming on, which is great. You know, it's real quick. As I said, we are going to have an event tomorrow, and Michael Pittaro is the keynote speaker, and he's the one. Now, what I like about Mike, and I'm going to mention this at tomorrow's event, was Mike has roots in corrections, and even though he may be out of corrections, he always kept his eye on corrections to see where corrections was going, where it was headed. And I think that what happens here, a lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of good things on the outside that can really help us on the inside, especially if they know where corrections is headed. Because right now we do see a lot of changes in corrections, but the changes that get implemented from the outside are more primitive because that's what they think corrections is. But then you have people like yourself that know that know where we're at in corrections, know how much we've evolved, and you're implementing things that really relate to where we are at now, and that's what makes what you do a little bit different than what somebody else does. So I think the first thing, oh, I got marker on my hand. That's from me playing with my daughter. Um, One of the first things is I don't think a lot of people know what transformational leadership is. So can we maybe define transformational leadership generally, and then how can that be applied into our correctional world? Because this is what we're going to be talking about tomorrow at the event.
Absolutely. Transformational leadership actually started out in the business world, and it was something that I came across many, many years ago and found it to be kind of appealing to me, and it was something that we weren't necessarily doing. In a pretty condensed version, it's more of like a coaching, mentoring style leadership. For the most part, corrections has traditionally relied on that kind of authoritative, paramilitary-like disciplinary type of approach. And I found that when I worked in corrections, that wasn't necessarily the best approach to motivating me and many others. This is more of a coaching, mentoring type of style, trying to bring out the best in everyone and trying to get them to see your vision. It all has to do with communication, too. So a leader is more of someone who is communicating actively with the officers, being a little bit more transparent with the vision, with the mission of the institution, and basically kind of just coaching them along to see why policies are in place and, essentially where those policies are going to take the institution in the future.
And what I think about this is great is because we actually were talking recently about how this can really transform people on the ground level to be future leaders, open up communication, which I think is much needed, especially from the front line to the higher echelon. And it really teaches people to be responsible for their work. So there's a lot of things here that can really help out employee morale and the overall safety and security of the institution, because we have to realize if the employee morale is low at any correctional facility, the integrity of the facility can be jeopardized because you don't have people that care about their job. And I think what's good about transformational leadership is it teaches people responsibility. So as a supervisor, I don't have to keep my eyes on them because the people that I'm supervising are part of. They believe that they're part of a team. They feel responsible for their work. So I mean, I can give them a lot more freedom. And as I said, I think this is something that needs to be implemented in corrections, and it's not. And I love the fact that you brought this into the limelight, and then I was able to borrow your idea a little bit because I did call you first, and try to push that into Corrections 1. So I do have an article, guys. By the way, the show is sponsored by Corrections 1 and AMU, American Military University, so the same school that Mike works for. And I was able to use that to kind of formulate an article, and I'm hoping that people read it are from the higher end, because I think right now it's when it comes to transformational leadership, I think right now I think there's a problem communicating from the higher up going down. I think there's limited communication going down that way, and I think this is what transformational leadership can encourage. It can encourage real good communication, both upwards and downwards. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Communication is probably one of the key ingredients, if you would, to transformational leadership. I think one of the things that most people complain about is that policies and directives come downward, but there's no necessarily explanation as to why. So it kind of, like you said before, it has to do with team building. It has to do with empowering the officers, making them feel valued and part of the institution, but also part of the decision making. I mean, ultimately, the leaders have the ultimate decision, but at least you're getting input from the officers.
Right, and as I said, I mean, there's nothing here about transformational leadership that is black and white, which means there's a lot of parts that are involved in this to make this work. And the biggest part here is definitely, we talked about communication, but definitely it's how we deal with our frontline staff. I mean, that's the key. That's the most important part in my mind, is if we want to have potential leaders, people that will eventually take our positions, then we have to give people in the lower positions the chance to feel that they're part of a team, give them that sense of responsibility. Because right now, Mike, and I think you realize this too, it seems like when we work in a correctional facility, we're broken down to frontline versus management versus inmates.
Right.
And I think when we have this transformational leadership, it eliminates the us versus higher end management, and it puts them both together. So we do have one united team, and I'm not saying it's versus the other team, but we do have one united team, and we're not isolated from each other. And I think transformational leadership is an attempt to bring that unity together, because that unity is a must, and no correctional facility can operate if we're divided amongst ourselves.
Correct. Yeah, that is correct.
Right, and then actually, that's part of, hey guys, so you guys know, transformational leadership is a part of the evolution. It's a part of where we need to be. It's a part of uniting the multiple departments. Also, it's a part of uniting the higher level with the lower level to make sure that we're one complete united force. Because right now, we are involved in a movement, and we can't do this separated, which means that we all have to be united from within, because we can easily be divided. So at this point, all our voices have to speak as one. And if they don't speak as one, we will be seen as divided, and no one's going to listen to us. But if we can come together with one collective voice, have leadership, really stand up for their people, and have their people stand up for their leadership, I'll tell you something, we're unstoppable. There's nothing that we won't be able to accomplish, because we'll be that one united voice. I think transformational leadership is a part of bringing that together. So I would like to ask you right now, specifically now, how can we apply that into our world? So dealing with the frontline staff, how can we apply transformational leadership to our world?
It's basically, I mean, it has a trickle-down effect. So the leader has to come in there, be a little bit more transparent, communicate better, listen, have input from the officers, empower them, and make them feel valued and part of the institution and where it's going. I think there's this closed offness, if you would, in that most of the leaders kind of stay behind closed doors. They're not necessarily walking the walk. They're not interacting with the officers. It's also having a genuine interest in them as professionals, but also a genuine interest in them in their personal lives as well. You know, when you feel valued, when you feel like you're needed, when you feel like you're part of something, it's empowering for people. And that's kind of the buy-in, if you would, to bringing people forward, to see where you want to take the institution, just explaining things, you know, why certain things are in effect, why we're going to do this, you know, why were certain funds cut, just basically explanations.
And
I think for me, it was basically I felt like I was in the dark.
I like what you said. I like that word empowerment, and I really do believe in that. I believe that you should give officers a chance to make decisions, back up their decision, especially if there's good intent behind it. But I really do like the word empowerment because it's empowerment that will train future leaders. If you're sitting there and not trusting them and not giving them the chance to make their own decisions and kind of micromanage everything that they do, then you're not really transforming anybody to be a leader. But if you empower them, you are transforming. So how important is empowerment to transformational leadership?
Oh, incredibly important. I mean, incredibly important. I mean, that's the whole part of it. I think that sometimes there's this fear that I think that the leader has to feel secure in their own position. In other words, you're training others to be in leadership roles, which is only going to make you look better down the road. So I think that we have to eliminate that fear that, you know, someone's going to maybe take, you know, piggyback and then take my job. And that's just irrational thinking.
Right.
I think that when people have that buy-in, that empowerment, morale goes up, job satisfaction goes up, turnover goes down. And it's just a win-win across the board. When people are happy in their jobs, they stay longer. And they actually do more. They do more than the minimum. That's the key there, too, is bringing people forward so they do more than the minimum responsibilities of their duties.
And Ryan, I did like what you said about leaders are a reflection of the people of the front line. I think a lot of leaders, people in supervisory positions, forget that. So when you're writing up an employee, you should be able to. I mean, I'm not saying personal to the point where you're writing them up based on a personal issue, but you should feel it. Like that. That should not be something that you want to do because that person is ultimately a reflection of you, a reflection of the agency. And again, when we write up, we should be writing up people, if we have to, in a manner that's constructive, especially if the intent is good. If we have to write somebody, because sometimes policies and procedures, we get stuck in positions where you have to do something, but it's more of constructive, so the person can grow, and you do it as, you know, hey, this hurts me because you're a reflection of me. And I think that's lost today. I think when people write somebody up, they write them up as separating them from like, oh, we're two individuals, so this is your mistake, so I'm going to write you up for your mistake, and I could still walk around smiling, but not in corrections. In corrections, the world is so tight-knit, and we need each other. We need that teamwork, definitely. But when you're writing the person, you are writing someone that is a reflection of not just the agency, you know, on the bigger end, but a reflection on the smaller end of your leadership skills. So you should be, you know, that's something that you shouldn't be taken lightly with a smile. You're writing somebody up who is a reflection of who you are and how you lead, correct?
Absolutely correct. I think part of it is also that we shouldn't be so quick to write someone up. Maybe you can have like a teachable moment, you know, explain what they did, what they could have done better. You know, once again, it depends on the issue, of course, and what went down. But most of the incidents, I think, are teachable moments, you know. And one of the things that I always frowned upon is that, you know, basically demeaning someone in a public setting where other officers are around, other staff members, or even, God forbid, in front of the inmates, because that, to me, lowers their power and their authority and just makes them look foolish and bitter and frustrated.
Right.
You know, I think that some of those things, or most of those things, should be done behind closed doors, one-on-one, and then turn it into a teachable moment. This is what you could have done better.
Right. What people don't realize, too, is when you demean an employee in front of the inmates, you yourself are setting up a divide and conquer. because you're basically gonna wind up having that officer redeem himself, and he's gonna go to the population because that's where he lost his self-esteem because he was yelled at right in front of the population. So I mean, I agree with that, and they should be constructive moments. Like leaders should never look forward to writing somebody up. It should be a last resort. And I have a feeling like let's say you're getting called to, hey, you're getting called to the administrator's office, whatever. You shouldn't always feel negative about that. Like, why am I only being
Correct.
called when something bad's happening, or you're coming down to see us when something's bad happening? Why can't, I feel good when I see you guys? And that's when you're right. That's where those constructive sessions would work well, because you would know for a fact, as long as the intent was good, and you do have people at front line with experience. So obviously you want management with experience, because when a decision's made, if you have management that doesn't have that front line experience, they'll never be able to understand why you made a choice. So it could be constructive for both ends, because if you have higher level management that's never been on the front line, it would be good for them before they punish you to ask you, why did you make that decision, just so I can understand, because I know policies don't explain everything.
Right, exactly. I think we're too quick to criticize, and I like the word you keep using, constructive. We use that in teaching, constructive criticism. You can say the same thing, but it's a softer way of approaching it. And we don't do enough, I think, of praising and just recognizing people. Now, that's something that you would want to do in more of a public type of setting, is, acknowledging them in a positive way. Instead of looking for the bad things and the things they're doing wrong, let's look for the positive things they're doing right.
Right. See, and that should be done more often, because it's not, and that's why we get those negative feelings when we're called to the higher echelon, because we know they're going to try to point out our mistakes. And when you work in corrections, you're barely ever recognized for the successes. So, it's good. What we need more is internal recognition, because we're not getting it from the outside. And I think that we could be a big part of boosting employee morale if we would just recognize somebody a little more, even if it's just within their day's work. It doesn't matter. If a job was done, encourage that, recognize it, because they're not getting it anywhere else. And just to read some of the comments here, Robert Snavely says, learn from your mistakes and do better. And I agree. And I agree with Robert Snavely. I'm a big fan of him as well. And that's what the constructive aspect is, because we are going to make mistakes, but we want to have the power to make decisions. And I think that if we get disciplined every time we make a mistake, you're going to cause the front line to be hesitant, because they're going to be afraid. So I like what Robert Snavely says. You can still be constructive, help people learn from their mistakes. And if you do it in that manner, you won't have people that are afraid to make decisions based on good intent. It's when you follow it with discipline that they become afraid.
Absolutely. You got to be approachable, accessible, available, all those three key A's, if you would. And I think that's really important. When you think of someone in a leadership position, and if there's always fear and anxiety when you think about going to them, that to me is not a true leader.
No, and that's sort of, unfortunately, the picture that's painted in a lot of agencies. It's not so much a dialogue. It's more of like, hey, this has to be done this way, and I really don't care what you think about it. But the point is, we should care about the front line, because they're the ones that they have to act, and they know best. They're immediately affected by the situation, so we really can't cut them off, especially if we're in a position far removed from what they had to go through. So we should look at experience to learn too. Before I write the person up for not following policy or procedure, let me learn. If I've never been on the front line, or I never dealt with that experience before, let me sit that person in the office and let me see what it is, why they had to make that choice, so I can learn, because maybe I don't have the experience. And Bethany Ann says this, and I kind of agree with Bethany Ann too, that constructive is a challenge that too many fail to master. Now, this is something I know you're going to touch on tomorrow at the ACA event in Mercer County College, which is basically part of transformational leadership is how we treat the front line. And we kind of touched on it, but just to go back in, why do you find it that people may find being constructive harder to do than just going right for the discipline?
I think it's personality. There's definitely personality attributes at play here. I think that you have to look at it as this is a person, and they need to learn from these things. You have to explain, how they could perform better, what they can do to improve. Most people, I would say the majority, welcome that type of advice. So you're basically saying the same thing, that there's something that you made a mistake in some fashion, but here's what I would have done. And like you
Right.
said before about leaders learning from the frontline officers, that's key there too. But once again, it's personality in that you don't feel like your leadership is somehow being jeopardized in a sense because you're asking them for advice or you're looking to them for, you know, some way to resolve a particular problem. I think that's part of it too, is that fear for them to ask you any questions. But most of us in this profession kind of have our roots right from the front line and then kind of progress forward. And I think sometimes we forget those roots.
And that's the key. That's the dilemma. I think that if we
Right.
do forget our roots, like, I mean, that's another thing. When you come from management, we obviously need a lot of people with experience being brought up to the top because we hope that when they're brought up, they do remember their roots because we need that brought to the higher levels. And then obviously you have those that may be taking those positions based because they got the correct degree or whatever it is that the agency was looking for. But the challenge is, you're right. You have to have those roots, and those roots should help you understand what the front line needs, and then you at the higher level with that experience, with that background, you could be very powerful and implement a lot of changes that could really increase the employee morale because you know what it's like to be at that level and what's needed. But you also have to remember, even though higher level has people they have to answer to as well, you have to remember the roots. And if you're brought up into that position, I think the upper echelon, the people that are directly above the higher level people, so we're talking about the higher executive positions, they should allow that person to voice their concerns, because if they don't allow that person to voice their concerns, that person's going to wind up having to close the door on his people. And then I look at the employee morale. Now the front line, they're going to think that this person's ineffective, but maybe it's not that person's fault. Maybe the door is being shut on him from a higher level.
Correct. Yes,
So,
definitely correct.
and transformational leadership is involved in all areas because everybody can always kind of move up. I mean, there is that, we may be a supervisor to so many people, but then there's another level, then there's another level, then there's another level. So, I mean, it doesn't just affect the front line, it affects the whole, it's like dominoes. It affects everything straight down. So I do think it's very important to allow that two-way communication so frontline can speak up for their concerns, but then higher level has the ability to speak up for the frontline concerns. So, seeing a supervisor go, like a frontline supervisor, go into a higher level management, the higher level management should never shut the door when a frontline supervisor comes in with concerns about his frontline staff. The frontline supervisor should have that door open so they can listen. And this way, the cool thing about this is that the frontline supervisor is also seen as being effective.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Now, when we talk about transformational leadership, we're talking about empowerment. We're talking about making people future leaders. So we're talking about giving them a chance to feel responsibility for the choices they make. How important is responsibility in regards to teamwork, especially in corrections? So how important is it for me as a supervisor to make the people that are on the front line feel responsible for their work?
Oh, incredibly important. It's not just feel responsible for their work, but actually have pride in their work. When you have pride in your work, you tend to exceed the normal minimum limits, I guess, and you tend to put in more time, you tend to put in more effort, and I think that's really important. And that's, I think, something that I witnessed is that people basically doing the very minimum, the minimum amount of work, the minimum amount of responsibilities, and never really going further because of low morale, poor job satisfaction, and burnout. And, of course, as you know, burnout leads to complacency and so forth. So that has a negative ripple effect. So if you can kind of uplift everyone and kind of empower people and make them feel valued and part of the team and have them part of the decision-making process, that's important. That's going to bring people up, and it's going to increase that morale. That's unfortunately so low in the literature. I mean, the literature consistently says that it's one of the lowest occupations as far as morale and job satisfaction. And of course, I'm going to touch upon the suicide as well, within our profession. So it's all kind of tied in. So if we can change, or rather improve, the culture of corrections, we can have this domino effect that'll improve so many other areas.
Right, and I believe what's good about what we're doing tomorrow at the ACA event is we're doing a panel event that allows for discussion. And that's why I chose panel, because I think that we've sat down, we've taken our classes, and we just kind of listen in, but then when we leave, what's really happening? I mean, are we going is what being taught is going to be applied, or does it get lost? And I think right
Right.
now what I want to do is I really want to open up people's eyes. I'm bringing some higher level people in, and they're going to listen. And I'm hoping that what's taught, because it's coming from us. It's coming from people with experience, and I'm hoping that it gets carried over into the facilities, because ultimately we're going to try to make, which is very hard in corrections, but a very negative environment a positive environment. And how we do that is by the people we work with. I mean, making sure that they want to come to work. And it sounds weird, like who wants to work in a facility or in a correctional facility? But the thing is, there's other things that are positive in there, like the brotherhood that we share, the sisterhood that we share, that you're not going to get anywhere else. And I look forward to that every day. So there are positives behind that wall, and I don't want to lose that, because we can't increase the employee morale. And I'm hoping that what's learned tomorrow, or what's out there tomorrow in the panel, based on two-way discussion, that means that your concerns are going to be brought out there to be addressed, that we don't just leave it inside the classroom, that we find a way to bring that out. That's the key for events like tomorrow. We have these discussions, and then the people that are part of these discussions, like, wow, I never thought about that. How can we bring that back into our facility? Hey, Mary from Texas. Mary's one of our regulars. I love her to death. But how do you bring that morale back into the workplace? And we got a couple of comments here, Mike. So let me just read a few here. The most common form of praise is simply silence. If they don't say anything to you, then you must be doing okay. And you know what, Beth? That's sad, because
Yeah.
yeah, when you do something correct, there should be some type of public recognition, at least amongst your peers. And unfortunately, you're right. You know, I do something correct. Oh, no one said anything? Good. I guess I'm good. And that means that we're doing our job, and we're fearing any choice we make, because we're waiting for someone to say something. And when they do, we have a feeling it's going to be negative. So that, to me, really affects the choices of the individuals if they're sitting there hoping that no one says nothing. But think about it. You know, I mean, just think about that. You're going to be hindered by choices, because the moment someone says, "Hey, Bethany, about last night, let me call you in the office," your stomach is going to be freaking turning until you finally see the individual, and you're hoping for a compliment. But the thing is, it shouldn't be that way. It should be that when you see the individual, your stomach shouldn't be turning, you know, because you know that individual understands the choice you made, and you feel confident, because then when you leave, you can take that confidence back into the field and be more decisive, because that person that doesn't back up that choice as a good leader, and especially if the choice was well intent, don't get me wrong, if the choice was well intent and that person doesn't back up your choice, then he can't get mad when you choose not to make a choice the next time something happens. Would you?
Absolutely. I think a large part of it is also just acknowledging them as a person as well. You know, hey, I heard you weren't feeling well, or I heard your wife or husband was sick, or was in a minor accident. How's he doing? How's she doing? I think it's just that genuine where you feel like, oh, all right, okay, he paid attention to me, or she paid attention to me. You know, I think it's that as well. It's not just seeing us as professionals, but going a little bit deeper too, seeing us as people. I think that's important when someone reaches out. Like if I have a supervisor that reaches out and says, hey, you know, I heard your son was pretty sick. How's he doing? That means the world to me. You know, you didn't have to say anything, but, you know, it's just acknowledging that, hey, you thought about me and you thought about my family. I think that's important as well.
And
I
that's
think it's just that, and it's genuine. It's not forced. That's the thing. It's a genuine compliment or concern. It's not forced. It came out of the blue. You weren't expecting it. I think that goes a long, long way. I mean, I really do.
right now when it comes to motivating your employees. Okay, now this is what's different for us on the outside. When it comes to motivating your employees, especially in the correctional realm, how do you go about motivating your employees in an already negative environment?
That's the key there. I mean, like the focus or the theme of tomorrow's event is the culture, and that's the thing. This is pretty much deeply embedded culture of that negativity, and that's what has to change. So obviously, it didn't occur overnight, and it's not going to change overnight. So I think it's going to take strong leaders getting other people in place, and as we've been talking about, kind of that trickle down effect. So it works its way down to the officers, so that they feel more, motivated and inspired to do something. But you're still going to have those negative naysayers and, those individuals. And hopefully that you can kind of get the majority to be more on board with the positive and the upbeat as opposed to those that are negative. Right now, I think it's more negative. I think there's a lot of low morale, poor job satisfaction, a lot of turnover. You hear about that constantly with the turnover.
Yeah.
You hear about the disciplinary action over minor things or the way it was handled. I think it just takes a complete change. We have to just have a complete paradigm shift in the way that we've been doing things from a leadership perspective.
Right, and as mentioned before, the effort here, especially to bring transformational leadership out at this ACA event, which is we're going to be doing tomorrow, is a great way to start that thrust forward. But you're right. I mean, we're battling something that's existed for a while, so it's going to be a battle. It's not something that we could just put in right away, because we have to kind of dig through a lot of stuff in order to get to the root, to the foundation. So if I may, that's another question. How do we attack that root? Like, what is the root? Like, I mean, where is the, how do we increase employee morale? Where do we have to look to first?
I would look to see who is in a leadership position. Who are your leaders? I think that oftentimes we hire from within, which I'm an advocate for, but we hire people that don't necessarily have leadership skills. We base a lot of it on seniority as opposed to, interpersonal skills. So I think that we have to be a little bit more selective as to who gets into these positions. And then also, once again, bringing people on board. One thing I never understood is, when I entered into administration, we would create policies and so forth, but we would never really get input from the people that were working the front line doing this. And for most of us, it was a number of years since we were in those similar positions. And I think Robert mentioned in one of the comments, you kind of they forgot their roots. And that's something that I always try to remember in anything I've done, is that always stay grounded. Know where you came from, so that you could always put yourself back into that position where you were once, at this particular level. And I think that's a good reality check to have.
Right.
I've always done that through everything. Even now with teaching, I always picture myself, okay, I remember when I was a student and, I didn't feel well. How would, I would like to have been handled in a certain way. I think that I always try to put myself in their shoes. And I think that's important. Empathy, basically, that's what it comes down to, is having an empathetic approach. This is not meaning staying soft. And I was going to bring this up tomorrow. This is not to be like, you're changing the culture to become very soft and butterflies and rainbows and unicorns. It's just a different approach in appreciating the people that work for you.
Right, and I just want to repeat. I'm looking at something. I like what Clayton Barrow says. He was referring to something from Robert Snavely, and he says, "Bosses forget, leaders don't." And I agree. Like, bosses, to be a leader, you have to have people that are willing to follow. Bosses, they're just that by label, but you can't be a leader without people that are willing to follow. And I think the best way to get people to follow a leader is the leader has to be empathetic. He has to understand. Or if he doesn't have the experience, and let's say they're just put into that position, well, then they have to learn from that front line and gain an understanding. Because if they're not willing to do that, and you're closing yourself off from the front line's perspective, well, they're going to close themselves off to you, and then you're going to find yourself to be in a lot of worry, because you cannot lead without people that are willing to follow that leadership. So, I mean, that to me obviously would be a number one concern, is obviously you have to have a leader in a position who's willing to listen. So obviously that would be a number one concern. If I saw that there was a problem with the employee morale, then I would look as far up as I can go and see where this communication hinders, because I want to see it and I want to attack that immediately. So, like, there's different levels of management, so I would like to see where communication stops. Because if you're not listening to the front line and you're not getting their perspective, then we need to attack that immediately, because that's going to affect employee morale. And in corrections, if the people don't feel good about their job, inmates are going to see that and they're going to manipulate that easily.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to talk about that as well. I mean, it leads to complacency, it leads to negativity. The inmates have 24/7 to watch this. They're observing the body language, the little comments that you're making when you're unhappy, and overhearing conversations, and that makes you vulnerable. So it's not a good thing. It's definitely not a good thing, and I think that's another reason that we have to kind of build them up. And once again, it's just having them feel valued, and I think, appreciated for what they've done. There's very limited rewards in this field. So, the praise, the recognition, little comments, pat on the back goes so far, but it doesn't exist, or very rarely does it occur. Like you said, when you think of getting called to an administrator's office, it's synonymous with you're in trouble. What did I do wrong, and what's going to happen to me? And you go into a mini panic attack.
Yeah,
and it shouldn't be that way.
I agree. And there's some management that says, "Oh, well, you don't want to get too personal with the employees," but you know what? You can limit. But I disagree with I understand the too personal. I understand that, but these are not inmates. These are your front line, and you have to know their needs. So there would be some sense of personal contact. I understand the too personal. You have to, as administration, you have to kind of be able to make decisions objectively, and I understand that. But it's also good to know your front line, their needs, so when you make a decision, the decision is the right decision, and that may involve a personal connection. But again, it's a connection that you can control. If you can't control it, well, that's where the issue is. But the point is, you can still be personal with the individuals that you work with, because then they'll see somebody that they want to embrace. Like the most loved leaders of the world, the ones that were well recognized, cared for their people, spoke for their people. But if I don't care for you at any level, how can anyone trust me to speak for you? It doesn't work that way. They don't coexist. And I want to talk about Robert Snavely real quick, because I'm reading some of his comments. And hey, Robert, I forgot where you're from. Just say the state. You don't have to say where you work. But he says, I remember when I interviewed for the hostage negotiation team, I thought I bombed, but later I had 3 supervisors tell me my interview was the best, and that made me feel pretty damn good. Now, see, to me, that's good, because the thing is, you know what? Everybody here, we're more than just a number. We go out for an interview, something that we really want. Don't forget, when we go out for interviews for higher positions, or to do something like maybe lateral, to do something extra, which we're not getting paid to do, but it's something that, it's great, because it promotes the fact that I want to do something else, which means there is a love for what I do. You want to encourage that. You want to make sure that, you treat those people like we're doing a class tomorrow, guys, for the ACA, right? We're doing a panel. We're doing a discussion about leadership, and training. We want people that want to be there, not people that need to be there because the job's telling them they need to be there. We want people that want to be there. And I think that right now, that's another battle we got to go through, to get the people that really have faith in the job enough to want to be at these training events. But having said that, those are the people that we need to really encourage and really find a need to motivate. When someone goes above and beyond, and we sit there and question why, if the above and beyond's good intent, don't get me wrong, and we sit there and are more concerned about why they went above and beyond, because we feel that what they're doing makes us not look like we're not so good at our own job. Like, I'll give you an example. If I used to be big on gangs. I used to love finding stuff about gangs, but always used to educate people about everything I knew. Even if they didn't want to hear it or not, I would, because I didn't find it as competitive. Like, I didn't say, okay, well, now you know more than me, let me shut up. It wasn't about that. It was about the fact that we had to work together to get a common goal. So I think that most of the time, if you're leadership and you're good leadership, you should encourage growth, even if it goes past you.
Yes, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. And Marie actually had a nice comment here. It says, it feels good. My captain ran and pulled me from the floor when the Fort Hood, Texas shooting. He knew my son was in that area. Just that general concern right there. It's someone who took an interest. Hey, are you okay? I know that your son's in this particular area. That's the kind of person that you want. There's that fine line between being too personal, but I think that with common sense and experience and education, we know that line.
Right.
So it's more just that compassion for people, the understanding of people. But, you're not going to go out and buddy up, because you still got to remain objective, that if something does go wrong, you got to be there to discipline. So there has to be that objective nature there, but that doesn't mean that you cannot be friendly with people and get to know them on a personal level.
Right.
I think sometimes people don't understand that. They're not seeing it clearly, in that you're not buddies with them. You're not going out drinking beers with them every night. It's just that you have a genuine interest in who they are. And, they're going through troubles. You've been through troubles. Maybe you've experienced challenges as well. I mean, most of the time when people go through issues, you've experienced it on your own, or someone close to you that has experienced. So just having that empathy for people.
And actually, Robert Snavely's from Maryland. Hey, but you know what I like what you said. Actually, the being empathetic. That as we mentioned before, that is the key. You really got to understand your employees. If you don't, you'll never be an effective leader. And wait, hold on, I'm trying to read the other comments here. This is advice from Mary, and she says, "My mom always told me, watch what you say. Walls have ears, and it's always stayed with me." So I guess that deals with the trust factor and. Kind of make. I mean, obviously, we do work in corrections, so you have to be very careful what you say because you don't want to say everything within earshot of inmates. But as I said, with leadership right now, I think we have a spot where we have a good chance tomorrow to really get a perspective from the front line, toss back to the higher echelon, so they can start to see what it is that's needed. And sometimes it's simple. Sometimes it's just communication or justification. Like I'll give you another example. Like even when we talked about discipline. If people understood leadership's perspective a lot more, maybe they would understand a discipline if they had to get disciplined. Maybe they wouldn't just be against it by looking at, man, this person's always coming for me. Man, what the heck? But sometimes, I'm telling you something, I've had to discipline people, shake hands with them, and then be invited to their baby shower. You know, because it's not personal, and I make them know that it's not personal, but we have something that we need to get. And they look at that, and to me, I think, can I tell you something? I know this may sound weird, but to me, that's a real good picture of a great leader who may have to discipline somebody, but, you know, will still shake hands with the individual and maybe even be invited to some family events. I mean, you know, maybe the family event's a little too far, but the point is to be able to do the discipline constructively, like was mentioned before, constructively, and not be seen as the enemy and still be seen as part of the same team. And that's hard too. Like when we talked about leadership, you know, how do you discipline and still keep that relationship with your employees? And my opinion is if they have questions, you answer them. You know, there's a lot of things where we got a lot of changes that are being involved. Like right now, guys, corrections is going through a big evolution because we're involved. We interact with them a lot more than we ever did. So there's changes being made in corrections that are geared towards rehabilitation and a more productive perspective towards corrections. Like basically, we're involved in a lot more, which the public still thinks we're not. They still think we're guards and we stand idle. And that's why I always mention we have to embrace the word correctional officer because it involves where we're at now. But part of that is we need to all feel that we're a part of the change. We need to all feel that we're a part of that evolution, that we're part of that movement forward. And if we feel that we're a part of that movement forward, we feel that we're a part of history because there is history being made. People don't realize it, but it's slowly happening. It's happening. Especially when you have someone like Mike that's now coming in with transformational leadership and then me always on the air talking about law enforcement and corrections. There's changes being made. People are hearing us. We're trying to build that one collective voice to bring that internal unity together. But the main thing here is that we have to see each other as a team, build from that, not be isolated from each other, and have leaders that we can open up to, that we can communicate with, and that they understand the needs of their people. That's the key, because I can't transform you if I don't have a foundation. Because all I'm going to do, I don't know what to build off of, and I can't transform you. But if I understand your needs, then we can start to mold, because I can start putting things in place that accommodate those needs. But the only way we can move forward right now as one united team is if there's communication open on both ends. And I also want to say something to the front line too, because we've been attacking a lot of higher level leaders here. I'd rather just also say something from the front line, to the front line. We also have to understand, we're going to mention this tomorrow at the ACA event, but we need cross-perspective training. And what I mean by that is, right from the roots, right from we have to corrections, we need to understand what the department's about, what the agency's about at a greater level, and how different departments work together for the one complete picture of what corrections is. If we can understand those perspectives at a ground level, first off, we would make great leaders, because when you get into those leadership positions, you're no longer myopic to one department. You have to look at everything and make sure everything flows fluidly, which sometimes get lost at an immediate level, at a departmental level, but definitely not at an administrative level when you're bringing stuff together. But we need to see things as one fluid motion. And then when we start seeing things as one fluid motion, we can start understanding the choices that certain people have to make. Like if a choice medical conflicts with custody, then the choice that's being made by administration is what holds the least amount of liability. And I have a feeling people don't look at that. They don't look at the choices that upper level makes based on liability. And when they make that choice, believe it or not, guys, I would say for the most part, I'm not speaking for everybody, so bear with me. The people that have the right intent, so I'm not speaking for everybody. Most of the time when administrative makes a choice, they're doing it to protect everybody. But it would be good if people could understand that perspective, which would involve the higher leaders maybe talking to someone and saying, hey, listen, this is why that choice had to be made. It's not to question your ability as a leader. It's just to let your front line feel that they're a part of something so they can understand what's going on, because there is a lot of changes being made in corrections. And right now, the front line's being lost in those changes because they don't understand. They don't know why these changes have to be implemented. But I'm telling you, if we had to tell them why those changes had to be implemented, they would embrace it. Or they could make something better. But we can't leave them out anymore. It's not part of transformational
Exactly.
leadership. Would you agree, or?
Oh, absolutely. And I like that other word you just used, embrace. And I think that's the mission there too, is to embrace it. And I think that has to be instilled in frontline officers. Embrace this mission. Come with me. I know what I'm doing here. This is why we're going to go forward. I think that it's explanation. A lot of it is really boils down to communication, personality, empathy, all those kind of key things that we look for pretty much in friends.
Right.
We just got to feel valued and so forth. And that just doesn't exist for the most part.
And
Very, very close-minded, for the most part, close-minded and very like, this is your job, just do it. And that just doesn't motivate most people.
it does, and I want to say, Mike's giving a great speech tomorrow, which I don't want to know what it is yet, but it's going to be at the ACA event in Mercer County College, and then we're going to wind up doing a panel based on leadership and training. So for the people that are listening now, what do you think makes a great leader in corrections? I mean that's our target audience is corrections. So what is it about leadership and corrections that may be different than the real world? I mean obviously, but what is it that makes a great leader in corrections, and what do you think needs to be done to make that happen? Because right now I'm gonna tell you something, Mike. Nationally, the employee morale is low. And we're always going to look to the leaders. I think the leaders are a big part of it because they're making decisions that the front line really can't relate with, that they're not a part of. I think a lot of the issues that we see on a national level could be easily settled if we all sat down at a table and worked well together, like just sat down and worked with people. And then when you have people that are in higher positions that represent custody levels or whatever, I always say custody, it's my background, but departmental levels, they got to speak up for their people, and they can't sit there and be a yes-no person, or whatever, a yes-man person, however that phrase was. But the point is, when you have somebody representing that department, they have to represent that department. I mean, that's a leader right there. You can't have someone that's only at the table who's going to yes ma'am everything or yes sir everything. They have to represent the needs of their department, and then the department, the next level up, the executive positions, have to allow them to do so. Because if you don't allow them to do so, then that's where shit starts to, the morale starts to drop, whatever. So right now, I think it's just a matter of putting the right people in the position, and it's okay. I'm telling the higher levels this. It's okay to get some pushback once in a while. You don't have to go right into the defensive mode, but it's okay to get some pushback because pushback invites some really good discussions. And I'm going to tell you something, and we all know this, Mike, and tell me if you agree because you've been at the higher level as well. Policies are written on the best of circumstances. Pushback challenges that and makes the policies better so people don't have to scramble to put stuff back in policy. So I think one of the good things here would be is good communication could make the jail or prison run a lot more fluid. But again, it deals with communication from the front line up and then backwards then back down, from higher up down. But if we don't allow that, we're not being effective and we're going to be stagnant. We're not going to move.
Absolutely. Or at least have representation, somebody who's, kind of the voice of the frontline officers that sits at that big table and, basically speaks for the group, someone that is, a key individual. I think that's so important, because that'll move things forward. That's the key there is that'll move things forward. I mean, common sense prevails in the sense that we know ultimately that we may have a great idea, but it may not fly. But at least someone's listening to the idea. That I think is important. Like, hear me out, and then you can kind of like actively listen, process it, and then respond to it. And then maybe you're seeing something I don't see. But I think the problem is we don't allow people to even get to that point. They get a couple words out, and we're like, no, we're not going to do that. That's too costly. That's not possible, or that's not the way we've done things. That type of mentality, that has to get eradicated, eliminated completely.
Right, and that's the
key.
key.
Be more open-minded and listen, actively listen. There's that one quote that always says, most people listen to respond rather than listen to process it. And I think that's part of the problem there is listen, process it, and then respond. Look at it from multiple angles instead of just your own angle.
Right, I'm trying to show all the venues that we're on in case people want to follow the show. Don't forget to subscribe to the live feeds. Just in closing, Mike, because this was kind of a last impromptu thing, because I know the event's tomorrow. I got some water bottles made with some Tier Talk logos for the event. But I just wanted to get the idea out there that, we're trying to do events that encourage communication. So we would encourage the front line to show up. And it's a professional communication. We're not attacking anybody. We're not looking to attack anybody. All we're doing right now is just trying to encourage communication to see where the doors are open and then just try to build from each other. Because as I said, there is going to be some changes going on in corrections, and we want to feel that we're a part of those changes. And that I think is what the key is. I think right now is that we feel that whatever changes are going on, we feel that those changes are going on in isolation from us. But if we could get together and feel that we're a part of this movement going forward, then you start getting people that feel responsible for what they do. They're empowered to make decisions. And now we can work together. And that's effective leadership. Because the thing is, if there's a failure on one end, then everybody fails, or they feel that they failed. But if there's a success, then it's a collective success. So the point is, it only encourages this unity. And right now, the reason why I'm a big fan of transformational leadership and a big fan of what you're trying to put together is we need our leaders, because we are going to get involved in something big. I'm telling you this, guys, right now. But we need our leaders to connect us at a ground level so we can have that one united voice. And if we don't have that one united voice, we'll never be able to fight up from where we're at now. Guys, we can't, we're at the bottom fighting. Every day we're at the bottom fighting, which means that any type of thing that can set back the movement, which is even some type of internal animosity towards each other or towards where we're going, puts us right back. So in order for us to move forward, we need that strength. And we need to do it as one. So I think transformational leadership is a big part of bringing the masses together as one, making sure we all have the same goal in mind. That's why we talk to Frontline. So when we have this movement going, we're all on the same page, and we become that train that just won't stop. But unfortunately, right now, it's going to be very hard for us to move forward, because even when we're trying to make the effort to move forward and move to a greater level, we have internal beef within ourselves. And all of a sudden we become separated. So you can have somebody speaking for the masses saying that we're officers and we should be treated as officers and we should be recognized as law enforcement. But then you get someone from our own people saying, no, we're just guards. And I'm fine with what we got. Well, everything that the other person just said is gone, because the perspective that we have is still guards. So that makes people okay, because that's consistent. That's consistent with what they believe in. They believe we're guards, so what do? They go back to the norm. That's the norm. So when people say guards, that's the fucking norm. So that right there will get people's attention way more than someone that just spent years fighting to be recognized. So we can't have that anymore. We can't, because we're going to make our way on national television. I've done it. I've been on CNN, MSNBC, Fox. I've been on there, and they called. I didn't fight to go on. They called me. They went on, and that means they trusted someone from corrections. And anytime I had a chance to correct someone for calling me guard or calling the field guard, I corrected them. I didn't give a shit who they were. Erin Burnett, Jeffrey Toobin, I corrected them. Because this was our chance. And when there was an NYPD cop telling us how manipulation works, and then when we left, he was wondering why I was getting more calls than him. I said, because I've experienced. You don't know what it's like to be behind that wall, just like I don't know what it's like to do what you do on the streets. So give us this moment. But together, we're still law enforcement. Together, we can work as one. But you're sitting there, and you're not saying anything positive. So I'm going to contest everything you say because you're no longer my brother when you bastardize the profession and you don't separate the individual who committed the negative action from the profession as a whole. Because I've walked the beat with a lot of great individuals who risked their lives for the public, and the public will never know what they did. And the moment you bastardize this profession, you're bastardizing all of them who sacrifice their lives every day to work behind the wall, and they don't get respect for it. So I will not let you disrespect that. And a good leader will make that voice heard. He'll unite, and the moment someone bastardizes the profession, they get involved. And they say, you know what, you're wrong. That's the damn individual, but the profession means this. And that's what you're about, Mike, and that's why your transformational leadership is needed, because it's going to bring about unity, and then when we become united, now we move forward. And I don't give a fuck if people ridicule about what we're doing or not. I don't care about. As long as I know I have the support from my people, that's all I care about. As long as I know that when I stand up on national television, if given the chance to do so, and the people that walk the beat back me up, I don't give a shit what someone says who's never walked the beat. I don't give a shit if you researched one incident and then all of a sudden think you know what we do, or I don't care what you think. All I care about is when I go back in and one person comments who worked the field and says, wow, that was great with what you said, then I'm going to sleep at night. And that's what you're doing, Mike. You're bringing that leadership to the front table, and that's why people should be at that event tomorrow, because if they're not, then that collective voice will never ever happen.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you, Anthony. And I agree with you. And what you're displaying right now is exactly what we need. We need someone to come forward and speak on behalf of corrections. You know, I do it through teaching, through writing, and you do it through your television appearances, through this Tier Talk. I mean, that's the key. I think that the more people that get out there and say this is the reality of corrections, because too many people don't know what we do. And that's what it comes down to. Too many people don't know what we do. And I think just getting that voice out there, and people respect you when you have their back, when you're defending them and the profession in general.
And Mike, I want to say something, because I know we got to come to a close. I want to thank you for your dedication, because even though you left the profession, you never left the profession. And what I mean by that is you always kept your eyes on corrections because it was in your heart. And even though you left to do something to educate people, you always look back to say, well, you know what? How do I help them? And you've constantly brought stuff back, including the AMU school, and you're constantly supporting those in the field. And it goes to show you that right there shows how powerful a brotherhood and sisterhood could be behind the wall. It shows you that no matter how successful you became in life, because I'm hearing you're doing very good, you just got your PhD, you never forgot your roots. And that's why I think it's perfect that you teach this class on leadership, or you give the keynote speech on leadership, because you are the definition of that. A person that never forgot their roots and were able to give back. And that's what's needed, because whatever change is implemented from your end, your change has the front line in mind. And that's what's needed. So, Mike, do you want to say anything to my audience before you head out?
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Anthony. I appreciate the complimenting words. No, I mean, this is a great profession. It always has been. I started out right out of college, and it's never left me. And what I've tried to focus on are the areas that need the most attention. And I'm in a position now where I can bring those weaknesses or deficiencies to light, and it's getting a lot of attention. The leadership articles, the suicide articles, just discussing those and getting that out there, because no one's talking about it. So I feel good being, part of the voice, I guess, for change, and as well as you. And I appreciate everything that everyone does, and I appreciate those who listened in tonight, and the comments especially. I thought the comments were awesome.
Right, and thanks, Mike, for coming on, brother. I'll see you tomorrow. We'll get to hang out and finally meet each other.
Sounds like a good plan. All right, I'll see you tomorrow morning.
All right, take care, brother. Bye.
You too. Bye.
All right, guys, just to see that we have an event tomorrow at the ACA. It's just a chance to open up and get our concerns out there and let the upper management know what we're about. And you're right, Sue. Mike is a great guy. He's been promoting the field once he left, and that's the important thing. The point is that it never left him. Which is great, and we need more of that. That's someone that was able to bring education and balance it with experience first, and that's what's needed. It's experience and then education. Education can only make things better, but experience is always needed. You can never, ever overlook experience. So again, you can follow the show on multiple venues. If I could just show you guys, iHeart, Spreaker, Facebook live stream, Player FM, Corrections One, tune in, check out the Event AC, subscribe to the show, and share the videos, guys. Let's get it out there, because I'm telling you guys, these social media platforms can work. You know, if we can get a real big collective group, we become a voice. And then when someone goes up and goes to speak something, let's say I go at an event and someone says, well, who the hell are you? Well, you may not know who I am, but I'm recognized by thousands of my peers. So I think I'm trusted enough to say that this is what is needed. And our first thing is to be recognized as law enforcement. So let's get that training up. And that's something we'll discuss tomorrow as well. So, guys, always be safe. I know you guys, your sacrifice usually goes unrecognized. Well, I'm recognizing it every day. So, guys, stay safe, take care of yourself, and always a pleasure.